Thank you everyone for joining. I think we're going to get started, and Jane, I'm going to let you kick it off.
Thanks everyone for joining. So as I hope folks know, I'm Jane Fox. I'm the chair of the Legal Aid Attorneys Chapter at ALAA. We have partnered with EDCAP to host this training for a workshop for union members to walk us through just the current state of PSLF, all things student loans. So just very appreciative to Nancy and Carolina for hosting this. There will be a second training on the evening of April 4th.
It might be the third.
The first Thursday in April. If you're registered here, there's no need to go to the second training. This will just be a repeat of this presentation. During the presentation, we'll be answering questions in the chat, but in the Q&A, and there'll be some live Q&A at the end. But just really hope that this will support everybody. There is a lot that is changing day to day. So Nancy has some up to the minute updates, and there's also just a lot of unknowns right now. So appreciate everybody for coming. We will, continue to try to support everyone in ALA with loans. So I'm gonna pass it over to Nancy to get us started. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jane. And just to clarify, the next one is going to be on April 3rd.
Thank you. And that's
6
p.m.
Yeah.
to 7:30. Thank you.
So my name is Nancy Neerman. I am the Assistant Director of the Education Debt Consumer Assistance Program. I'm here with my colleague, Carolina Rodriguez, who is the Director. And we're really pleased to be doing this webinar for you, although we wish we had a lot better news and information, but it is what it is, and we're going to try to give you the best, most up-to-date information that we have available to us. So just a few housekeeping items. As Jane mentioned, I'm going to be doing the presentation, but Carolina is going to be behind the scenes as well as Jane, answering your questions in the Q&A. And that is if you have any questions on the topics that we're discussing or on anything pertaining to student loans, just feel free to type it in, and we'll break periodically to share those questions with the group. So with no further ado, I'm going to take myself off video and share the screen, and then we'll get started. So Carolina, if you could just confirm that you can see the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
So we've got quite a few things in the agenda today. I'm not going to go over each additional item right now. We'll just go as we come across these topics. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about our program, the EDCAP program. We are a program initiative of an organization called the Community Service Society, which is a large nonprofit. It's been operating in New York for about 180 years. This program was created in 2019 specifically to deal with the issue of student debt for two reasons. Number one, because student debt is basically a financial crisis in the country and in New York State. In the country, it's the second largest consumer debt next to mortgages at about $1.7 trillion. The other reason that we formed this program is because the student loan system is so incredibly complex and has only gotten more complex over the years that we've been dealing with it. So some of the things that we do, and we are state funded, so all of our services are free. We offer through our helpline or through our network of 11 organizations that are located throughout the state. We can help you do things like figure out what the best repayment plan is for you, help you access loan forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge programs, do all the applications when they're available for things like consolidation, deferment, forbearance, which we've been doing. The consolidation has been a big part of what we've done over the last few years. We also act as an advocate if you're having a dispute with a lender or a servicer. We'll get on the phone with you and help you try to resolve that dispute. We can help you get out of default or prevent you from going into default so that you're not subject to involuntary collections. We more recently have gotten into sort of the more pre-college counseling aspects of this business, including helping students fill out their FAFSA applications, and also generally counseling people on how to fund higher education, which with a minimal amount of debt. So if you know anybody that's looking for that type of service, feel free to pass them on to us. Okay, so we're going to go into the important updates. And there's a slew of them. And as Jane was saying, some of them literally happened in the last half an hour. So let's start with what's happened to date in terms of the layoffs at the education department. This all happened in the last week and a half or so. Basically, they have cut about half their employees, probably a little bit more of that if you include the people who resigned or retired. So we're already potentially seeing that there's going to be a severe impact on how borrowers are able to access things like trying to get to resolve their problems. They've basically shut down or fired most of the staff in some key areas, like the areas that oversee some of the student loan servicers and the lenders, the call centers, borrowers who, like all our contacts at the Ombudsman's office and the stakeholder engagement group have been let go. So really, this paints a picture of the ability of borrowers to resolve any kind of disputes, is going or file a complaint that's going to go anywhere is going to be severely impacted by these cuts. The technology division is another area that was hard hit. So we have yet to see what impact this may have on, let's say, the way applications are processed or some of the information that you can access from your federal student aid account. We've seen in a number of instances over the last few months that you go and log into the federal student aid accounts and no loan information is showing up. So all of this stuff is concerning, but we have to be vigilant and keep track of what we can keep track of, and report these problems and errors as they come through. But just be geared up for a lot of delays and potential technical issues as we try to sort through this transition to a much smaller staff at Ed. You may have seen in the news today also that it appears that the president is about getting ready to sign an executive order to just downright shut down the Department of Education, which of course he's been threatening to do all throughout his campaign. To be clear, the department cannot be eliminated without an act of Congress, but that doesn't mean that they can't disrupt, because they've already done a fair amount of disruption. And they may try to move the management of the student loan portfolio to a different department, although I think the press secretary was quoted just, I think, in the last hour saying that function is going to remain at Ed. But who knows? We don't really know exactly what's coming down the pike. What probably will happen, though, again, is that there's going to be processing delays, particularly for forgiveness and discharge programs. And it could be potentially create a situation where there's a lot of administrative errors with people's loan details. So the big takeaway that we want to impress upon everybody here and everybody that we talk to is keep really good records of your own loan situation. Don't depend on the government or the servicers to do that. So you want to make sure that you're downloading things like your loan details, your payment history, that would be from your servicer account, information from the PSLF and IDR forgiveness trackers that you currently can find on your federal student aid account at studentaid.gov. Any important notifications that you may have received from the servicer, you want to download all that stuff, and you want to probably be doing that on a regular basis. We're going to recommend monthly, or of course, if you receive any kind of notification that your loans are going to be transitioned to a different servicer, or that the entire function is going to be transitioned to a different department, you want to make sure that you download this information. In terms of the SAVE litigation, you're probably well aware of the fact that the SAVE plan was blocked by an injunction last year. The Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals recently upheld that injunction and basically sent the case back, remanded the case back down to the lower courts for final decision. As a result, those of you that were in the SAVE plan last July and were placed in a forbearance remain in that forbearance. I will remind you that the forbearance is a non-interest bearing forbearance that does not count towards loan forgiveness. The the other issue that happened right in the wake of the most recent court ruling, though, was that online and paper applications for the IDR plans have become unavailable. And at this point, no IDR applications are being processed. So you can't enroll, recertify, recalculate, or switch your IDR plans at this time, which we know poses an issue for those of you that are in the SAVE plan and in that forbearance that are trying to get into a different plan so you can continue earning credit towards forgiveness. But there is some benefit, I would argue, of being in the SAVE forbearance at this time, because at least you know you don't have to make a payment and interest is not accruing. People that are not in the SAVE forbearance are bumping up against different issues that are a little bit more significant. I will say that in terms of the IDR paper application, it's no longer available on the forms library. However, I happen to have had saved the most recent version of that form before they took it off the forms library. So we actually did post a link to it at the end of this deck. So you would have access to it if you just wanted to file the form, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. IDR forgiveness, that's the forgiveness that you get just by virtue of being enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan after 20 or 25 years. To the best of our knowledge, that's not being processed right now, even through the income-based repayment plan. We're not sure that it's being processed, where it's frankly still legal to do that. But it's certainly not being processed through SAVE, PAYE, or ICR, and whether or not it will be allowable in things like PAYE or ICR is going to be contingent upon the outcome of this litigation. Online loan consolidations are not available, but servicers are accepting paper loan consolidations. You can still upload those, or you can still send those to the destination server. It all goes through Advantage. But keep in mind, if you send in a consolidation application that with an accompanying income-driven repayment application, the whole thing may not get processed because they can't process the IDR component. Also, if you're thinking about consolidation right now, remember, because they're not processing the IDR component, you could wind up in after the consolidation is completed, you could wind up in a standard repayment plan, not in forbearance, that you can't afford. So I think if you're considering consolidation, you might want to reach out for some help before you do that right now. Unless it's really, really necessary, it's probably better to wait until they're they're processing the IDR applications again. PSLF does remain in place, so PSLF is not part of the litigation. Obviously, the repayment plans that get you there are, but PSLF itself is not. So if you're in a non-SAVE IDR plan, you can continue accumulating credit, and we're going to talk more about this later. Other potential changes to student loans outside of the scope of the legal issues are that, well, number one, we are 99.99% sure that the court ruling is going to eliminate the SAVE plan. So that's not going to be an option going forward. Other rules that might be effective if the SAVE-related regulations are also struck down as a result of this court ruling are things like the automatic IDR recertification that was proposed being done with the authorization to get IRS retrieval data on an annual basis when you were required to recertify. That's unfortunately part of the regulations. If they strike down the entire regulation, that will be struck down too. The key one, of course, is whether or not you'd be able to get weighted average retroactive credit towards IDR forgiveness after consolidation. Now, this is different. The rules for PSLF are different, and I'm going to go over those later. But if you're just thinking about IDR forgiveness, consolidation might wipe away any credit that you might already have achieved. And then things like access to the IBR plan and the ability to earn credit towards forgiveness while you're trying to cure a default. And like I said, the appeals court has indicated that they are even encouraging the lower courts to expand the scope of the initial challenge to include things like whether or not IDR forgiveness can be offered through the payee or the ICR plan. So we'll have to wait and see how that all pans out. I will mention, and for those of you that may not be aware, the income-based repayment plan, or IBR, that is the one repayment plan that is in statute that expressly offers forgiveness at the end of 20 or 25 years. So that plan would be exempt from this kind of ruling. But other changes beyond the legal challenges, the Republican-led House of Representatives is proposing some sweeping changes to the student loan system through the budget reconciliation process. And just so everybody's clear, this is different than the continuing resolution, which was just passed to avoid a government shutdown, to extend to allow the government to function basically through September. That's a different thing. We're talking about the Republican, the House of Representatives and the Senate, basically the Congress, trying to establish an actual budget this year. And through the reconciliation process, which is an expedited process that can allow Congress to create certain tax, spending, and debt ceiling legislation, but through a faster process that limits the time for debate, and most importantly, only requires a simple majority to pass. And of course, now that the Republicans have both the House and the Senate, they could be in a position to do this. Some of the proposals that we've seen that are included, at least in the House resolution bill, would be replacing income-driven repayment plans and replacing all the plans, basically, repayment options, with just two plans. One, the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan, and two, some version of an IDR plan, but one that would not provide forgiveness. And how they actually structure that is a little bit of a mystery, but that's exactly what they seem to be, or that seems to be what they're leading up to. Of course, this could trap low to moderate income borrowers in these plans basically for life. They're also talking about sunsetting the PLUS loan programs for both parents and graduate students. So that would mean that borrowers may have to look towards private loans to fund some of the gaps between what they get in federal aid versus the cost of attendance, which, of course, going towards the private market, less regulated, more predatory, would be generally bad for borrowers. And then limiting access to the PSLF program, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later with the most recent executive order that was announced. One other update before we move on, just about the total and permanent disability discharge process. TPD offers full loan discharges for borrowers who have some kind of a mental or physical disability that allows them prevents them from earning a livable wage. Doesn't mean you can't work completely, but basically it doesn't allow you to engage in the kind of activities that would earn you a decent living. The management of this program is being transitioned from Nelnet to the Department of Education. That actually started during the Biden administration at the end of December. They suspended processing the applications. The new process was supposed to be up and running this month, but we've heard virtually nothing about that. So we'll have to just, stay tuned to determine when they open up that process again. But I can tell you that Nelnet is no longer accepting any of the applications. So at this point, if you're trying to file a TPD application, you're gonna have to wait until they give us more guidance. But you might have to take a forbearance if you can't afford the payments that you're currently being asked to make. Okay. Any questions on the updates before I move on?
I think we can continue. You're going to be covering buyback.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. I'm going to just start by, broadly speaking, in our experience in doing this for 5 years, one of the things that we always try to leave our clients with, aside from just addressing immediate issues, is what is your long-term strategy for addressing your debt? And basically, we've determined that there are three different buckets that people fall into. Number one, either pay the debt in full as quickly as possible. So this is going to be for people who have larger loan balances larger incomes in comparison to their loan balance, which allows them to make a payment that's more than the minimum required payment, or even allows you to make lump sum payments. So if this is your strategy, you just want to pay as quickly as possible, which may mean that you have to make higher monthly payments. But the idea is that if you pay it off as fast as you can, you save money and interest overall over the life of the loan. The second bucket, which I would imagine is where most of you are, and in fact is where most of our clients are in general, is to pay the minimum required while you're pursuing forgiveness. So this means identifying a forgiveness program such as PSLF that will allow you to eliminate your loans in 10 years. And while you're making those payments, you just want to make the minimum required payment. So that there's really no point in making extra payments if the whole idea is to just get your loans forgiven in 10 years. And in fact, if you have a very large loan balance, if you're sitting there with $150,000 in loans and you're making $80,000 a year, it's not likely that you would be able to pay that off in less time than you can get your loans forgiven. And then finally, we talk about paying the minimum required until death do you part. I mean, this is generally for older borrowers who maybe took out late in life loans for themselves or Parent Plus loans for their kids, and now are either at retirement or nearing retirement or are in retirement, and basically know that they're going to have to pay these loans for another 20 or 25 or 30 years, which could mean they're paying for the rest of their life. The idea here is find the cheapest available payment and then just make that until you pass. And the reason that we put this in here, though, is because some people don't realize that unlike other types of forgiven consumer debt, federal student loans are dischargeable in death. So when the borrower dies, the debt obligation does not pass to their estate or to their beneficiaries or their loved ones. Okay, and then we've got the whole issue of repayment options. Now, I would imagine that most of you folks are on an income-driven repayment plan, but there's two basic ways to make your payments in federal student loans. Either the traditional repayment plans, where the payment is based on the size of the debt, the interest rate, and a predetermined payback period, which in the student loan system could be anywhere from 10 to 30 years, depending on certain circumstances. But the fixed versions of these plans are like paying back any type of regular consumer debt. The pros of doing a traditional plan are sometimes you can pay it off shorter, in a shorter period of time. It's not as administratively complex. You just enroll in the plan, and that's your payment throughout the life of the loan. It's going to be best suited for people with the higher incomes and lower loan balances. The cons, of course, are that it's very often a prohibitively expensive plan that you can't afford. Limited flexibility in adjusting your payments, and it offers no forgiveness if you remain in the plans throughout the life of the loan. And the plan names, if you see them, standard, extended, graduated, or if you happen to see on your servicer account that you're in a level plan, that would be a fixed version of one of these traditional plans. The alternative, of course, is income-driven repayment, or IDR. And when we say IDR, that's an umbrella term for all of the different repayment plans that we're going to be talking about. They offer affordable alternatives to the traditional plans. There is loan forgiveness in these plans after, well, 10 years was going to be in the SAVE plan, but generally 20 to 25 years of payments. And then again, that 20 to 25-year forgiveness may be questionable in some of the plans going forward. But it is required for certain forgiveness programs like income-driven repayment forgiveness and PSLF. And of course, you can adjust your payments under normal circumstances if your income situation changes. The downside, of course, is that you have to go through this annual recertification of your income and your family size, tax filing status. The interest very often does accumulate because the payments that you're required to make often don't cover the interest that's accumulating on the account. And that's why you make payments on your loans for year after year after year, but the balance just keeps going up. And it could take you longer to get rid of your loans in an IDR plan, Although if you're pursuing PSLF, that is a 10-year path to forgiveness, which is one of the shorter paths to forgiveness. And then, of course, the 4 different plans are income-based repayment plan, or IBR. That's the one that's in statute. Pay-as-you-earn, income contingent repayment plan, or ICR. And then the SAVE plan, I mean, nothing is being processed right now. The SAVE plan itself was something that you really can't even enroll in, even when the IDR applications were being processed. So that's why I say it's on hold, and it's probably going to be eliminated. IDR forgiveness, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. One of the things that I really wanted to mention here is that during the Biden administration, they implemented something called the IDR account adjustment, which allowed borrowers to accumulate retroactive qualifying payment credit towards IDR forgiveness, based on a set of relaxed rules. And the results of that program now should be on your federal student aid website, or studentaid.gov website account, under this banner that says IDR end of payment term. This is your IDR forgiveness tracker. The current challenges to the IDR plan options obviously are that the SAVE litigation is questioning whether borrowers can receive IDR forgiveness under most of these plans. We talked about IBR, and the fact that IDR forgiveness is paused across all the IDR plans. We want to make sure, and we want to just continually reiterate that you want to make sure you download and save all your records, including all your progress towards IDR forgiveness, even if you're pursuing PSLF, and I'll explain why that's important later. And then just stay tuned for more advice if you are close to meeting the requirements under the IDR forgiveness plan. Again, that would be either 20 or 25 years. Even if you're in the SAVE plan, the credit that you've accumulated towards IDR forgiveness can be transitioned to a different repayment plan to actually get forgiveness if you can't get that forgiveness through SAVE. So now we're going to talk about PSLF and how all this ties into PSLF. So just to review the rules of PSLF, you need to make 120 qualifying monthly payments. That's 10 years worth of payments, after which the remaining loan balances are forgiven. And a qualifying payment is defined as any on-time payment made in full on or after October 1st, 2007. That's when the program started. If you had any qualifying employment prior to that date, it doesn't count. You must be making these payments on direct loans. You must be in an income-driven repayment plan, or some payments in the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan also count. Now, of course, if you enroll in the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan, and if you remain in that plan for 10 years, you will have no loans left to be forgiven. So generally, at some point, you have to switch to an IDR plan. And then the employment requirements are that you must be working an average of at least 30 hours per week for one or more qualifying employers concurrently, so at the same time. And a qualifying employer is generally going to be a 501c3 nonprofit or other types of not-for-profit organizations, and governments. The payments do not have to be consecutive. So if you've been working in public service for 3 or 4 years, and then you decide to leave to go to the for-profit rule, and you come back, you don't lose that credit that you had previously accumulated. This is key, this last bullet, in case you weren't aware of this. At the time that you file that application to get your loans forgiven, so you think you've made all your 120 qualifying payments, you must be employed. So you must meet the employment requirements of the program at the time that you file that application. So if anybody is close and you're thinking about retiring, you may want to think twice before you do that, before you can actually get that application in. And key for PSLF is that forgiven balances are not taxable at the federal level, and they're not taxable at the state level in New York either. So the IDR account adjustment and PSLF, we talked about the IDR account adjustment as it pertained to the income-driven repayment forgiveness program, but how does that really help public service loan forgiveness? So the idea is that all that credit that you got, the retroactive credit that you got based on a set of relaxed rules, that you got for IDR forgiveness can be converted into PSLF credit once you verify your employment for those months. So you would have to file the PSLF forms, and we'll talk more about those forms later, verifying that you've met the employment requirements. If you've already got qualifying payment credit under IDR forgiveness for those months, that can be converted then to PSLF credit. Just a quick note on this, if anybody still has FFEL loans, those loans had to be consolidated by June 30th of 2024 in order to be eligible for the IDR account adjustment to get retroactive credit towards PSLF. So if you still have FFEL loans, it doesn't mean you can't earn credit towards PSLF. You would have to consolidate them and make them direct loans, but you're going to be starting at zero. You're going to be there's on that particular loan. You would have to start from zero in terms of accumulating the 10 years of qualifying payments. So consolidation rules for PSLF. Now, these rules were new and are not part of the current litigation, but these are rules that were implemented in, I think they were enacted in 2023, but enacted in 2022, implemented in 2023, that allows borrowers who are consolidating loans for public service loan forgiveness to get a weighted average credit, retroactive credit for consolidation when you consolidate for PSLF. So what does that mean exactly? So let's say you have two direct unsubsidized loans. Each loan has a balance of $50,000. One loan has 40 months of qualifying payments towards PSLF, and the other has 60 qualifying payments towards PSLF. Once you consolidate the loans, you'll have one loan, one direct unsubsidized consolidation loan of $100,000 with 50 qualifying payments towards PSLF. So it's a weighted average credit of the loans that went into the consolidation. The ones with the shorter period of months will get more months. The ones with the longer period of months will get a few less months. But overall, this can actually make sense. And if you're thinking about that and you want to reach out to us, we can walk you through that whole process, individually as it pertains to you. But that process is still in place. It's still allowable. The one thing that you want to do if you're thinking about doing this is you want to submit the PSLF certification forms to update your qualifying payment count on all your loans before you do that consolidation. So that's to make sure that you know exactly what each loan is entitled to before it goes into the consolidation. And then you can check to make sure that the post-consolidation qualifying payment count is accurate. Right now, we don't recommend consolidating for this reason until after the IDR application processing resumes. The PSLF buyback. Okay. So again, the PSLF buyback was part of the same new rules that were implemented that contain the weighted average credit towards PSLF upon consolidation. Again, not part of the current litigation, but it's also not part of original PSLF law, and PSLF is law. So these rules could potentially be rolled back a little bit more easily. I'm not saying that they've talked about doing that just yet. It's just that they could be. What the buyback allows you to do is to purchase public service loan forgiveness credit for months spent in disqualifying statuses, such as the save forbearance. Maybe we'll have to see how they interpret this going forward. It would allow you to do this under a particular set of circumstances. So number one, you must have 120 qualifying months of employment on record. That doesn't mean you have 120 qualifying payments. It just means that you have 120 qualifying months of employment, meaning that you need to have your employment certification up to date. And then the months that you're planning to buy back have to get you to 120 qualifying payments. You can't purchase months prior to consolidation, and you can't purchase months spent in a school deferment, a grace period, or default. Now, the payments that they're going to ask you to make in a buyback are based on the payments that you might have been making in an IDR plan prior to entering the disqualifying status, and maybe an average of that and the amount that you were paying immediately after exiting that status, if that part is applicable. So If you think you might want to try the PSLF buyback, now we don't know whether they may be processing some of these. We don't think that they've processed anybody that is trying to buy back payments in the SAVE plan yet. But you can request the buyback at studentaid.gov, and you want to be very specific with your request. So you want to, again, specify the months that you want to buy back, and state that it's for the purposes of getting a public service loan forgiveness. Again, there's no downside to submitting this paperwork. It may sit there for a long time and not get processed. But if if you see that as potentially one way of getting you out of the SAVE forbearance and into and getting you qualifying payment credit, you can try this option. Again, we're not aware that they have processed or approved any PSLF buybacks for people who are in the SAVE forbearance. And then I also want to mention the executive order on public service loan forgiveness. So President Trump very recently issued an executive order directing the Secretary of Education to redefine public service agencies that qualify for PSLF, seemingly to basically exclude organizations that they claim violate federal immigration laws, support terrorism, or engage in violent acts against the United States government, engage in child abuse. I'm not sure I'm aware of any 501c3 or any nonprofit that encourages people to engage in child abuse, or aid illegal discrimination, violate state laws. Basically, they want to disallow PSLF for anybody that doesn't agree with the types of things that he happens to agree with. But the executive order doesn't eliminate the program, and it doesn't immediately change the program requirements. You need to stay tuned for updates. There may be some pushback legally on this. PSLF is law. You can't eliminate it. And with an executive order, the whole idea of him doing this via executive order is highly questionable. At the very least, they would have to go through the negotiated rules process, which can take a year or more. And the issue of 501c3 nonprofits being eligible for PSLF is written into the PSLF statutes. Okay, before we go on to guidance, Carolina, if you're still there, is there anything we need to address?
Yeah, I was having fun behind the scenes. So the first thing, staying on the topic of buyback, because I've been going back and forth on the chat a little bit around this because it's so important. We just found out that like if you're requesting buyback, remember you have to have like the 120 employment months, but for potentially being in a forbearance, you haven't met the qualifying payments. We just learned, and I put in the chat, that you have to literally use very specific language when requesting buyback. Otherwise, the Department of Education is claiming it will not be considered a request. It will be an inquiry and it will get rejected. Take it with a grain of salt, meaning I would use that language, but I say take it with a grain of salt in the sense that they may be just responding to borrowers to close out the cases by saying you didn't use the correct language. They're telling borrowers to resubmit using that specific language. So anyways, all that to say, I put it in the chat. I think there was a question about when do we expect IDR plan processing to resume, Nancy?
IDR plan processing resumption is a little unclear. When they shut everything down, they basically said it could shut down for up to 3 months, or it could be less, or it could be more. So that basically is, I don't know.
And the 3 months go all the way through May. So stay tuned. I was putting in the chat that there may be a little bit of hope now that advocacy groups sued the Department of Education yesterday over this issue that you cannot just prevent people from having access to IDR plans. I think there was a related question of someone who I will assume it's on SAVE, the SAVE forbearance, and asking whether they can switch out. And the answer is no. Like you're probably going to be in limbo if you try to switch because they're not going to process your application. There was another related question of someone saying that they applied to switch in, let's say, January from SAVE, and their application has not been processed. And the question was, would they be able to get retroactive credit I would assume based on their submission date. And I am saying it is very unlikely, and it is more likely that people who have submitted applications to switch IDR plans or get out of SAVE might in fact have to resubmit. You want to stay tuned for guidance, because what we found in our practice is that it takes longer for Ed to go through the backlog than for someone to just request it again once the online system hopefully is back up and running and working, fingers crossed. In terms of getting retroactive credit based on your request of an application, that would be common sense, but we're not dealing with common sense people. So I doubt you would be able to get that retroactive credit, unfortunately. The only hope has been buyback. And as I was again talking in the chat, we have yet to see anyone get buyback. I think the last administration was working hard to put in the infrastructure, and now, as we know, half of the staff have been let go. So it's still a little bit uncertain, to say the least, whether buyback will be fully implemented. And of course, there's always the risk that this new administration might try to roll back even those guidelines or rules, I should say. Let me take a quick look to see if there's anything else. In terms of, um, are you going to talk about the tracking of PSLF, Nancy?
Yes, I do believe I have some slides on that.
Okay, then I'll stop there so you can go on.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go now into guidance, and we've kind of already touched on a lot of these topics, but let's try to kind of go over it in general. So the first set of guidance is really for IDR borrowers in general. So if you're in the SAVE forbearance, there's really no action to take right now. At least if payments are paused, there's no interest accruing on your accounts. Wait for the IDR applications to reopen to potentially switch plans. And just kind of to follow on the conversation or some of the things that Carolina just said, if you haven't filed an application to switch your IDR plan yet, and Carolina, pipe in if you disagree with me, I frankly would not do that. I would not upload that paper application to the servicer at this point, if you're in the SAVE plan, because that paper application might wind up just sitting there a lot longer than once they switch it back on, you go in and do it, you just do it online. So you also can reach out for help to explore your IDR plan options before switching. We'll have to, number one, see what's available. And there are some income tests that apply to both the payee and the IBR plans, but it's not a straight income. It's an income in comparison to your debt. So if you have what you construe to be a reasonable income, $100,000 or more, doesn't mean that you're necessarily not eligible for IBR or payee, particularly if you have a large debt balance. And if you're in the standard plan trying to enroll in an IDR plan, so these are for people that were maybe had just consolidated their loans, had applied for an IDR plan, that got kind of stuck in this situation where everything was just, nothing got processed and then it got shut down. You can request a forbearance if you can't afford the standard plan. If they give you a processing forbearance, and that's what I would request for a number of reasons. Processing forbearances actually should be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Whether or not they actually apply them properly is another question, but they should be. But the processing forbearances, if they give that to you, you want to keep on top of that, because they may only give it to you for about 60 days, after which you would then have to renew it. So you have to keep checking that in the account and then contacting the loan servicer. And then stay alert. We're going to have, I think, a link to the EDCAP newsletter in the deck, and we'll be sending out information on when things like the IDR plan applications open up, when recertification dates change, and all that good stuff. Now, if you do need to recertify your IDR plan, number one, double check to make sure your recertification is actually required. So you look to your servicer account to do that. If you're not clear what it's telling you, you want to look at the anniversary date. But you also should get notifications from the servicer that you're required to recertify your plan by a specific day. If you can call the servicer to verify, you want to do that as well. If you are required, and this is where people have really had some sticky issues. If they're not in the SAVE forbearance, if they've been in payee, ICR, or IBR, they may have been asked in the last month or so to recertify their plans. Not everybody, but there are some that were asked. And of course, you can't recertify your plan right now because they're not processing the applications. So some people are again being pushed into, they're not necessarily being pushed out of the plan, but they're being pushed into payments that equate to the standard 10-year payment amount, which you can't afford. If this is your situation where you were asked to recertify, but you can't because of the barrier to recertification right now, this is where you do want to submit a paper application. And I do have access. I do have a link to the paper application in the back of the deck. You want to either upload that to your servicer account, but you want to do it in a way that you have proof of when you did the submission. So if you do upload it to the servicer portal, you want to maybe video what you're doing, take a screenshot of the fact that you've uploaded on a specific date at a specific time, because it doesn't always show in your servicer account that you uploaded it. Or you can, and in addition to uploading it, you can send it via certified mail or fax it and just keep all the mailing receipts. And the whole purpose of this is that if they try to come back to you and say, well, you missed your recertification deadline, you have some proof that you were adhering to the rules. It wasn't your fault that you missed the deadline. Now, one little like hot off the press update on this that I didn't even have time to put into this deck is that it was pointed out today that Mohila on their website is now saying that they have pushed back recertification dates for all the income-driven repayment plans, including payee, IBR, and ICR, through February of 2026. Now, the SAVE recertification dates have already been pushed back dramatically. And for the SAVE borrowers, it doesn't even matter because you're in a forbearance, so you're not being asked to recertify. It was for all the other plans that it was a problem. So Mohila actually is stating that on their website right now. I actually called Ed Financial subsequently to seeing that to ask them if they were doing the same thing, and they said that they were not doing the same thing just yet. But stay tuned, because if one servicer does it, the rest of them should follow in line. It should be a directive from the Department of Education. But again, this is where maybe the pressure from some of the lawsuits may be effective in getting things to move quicker than they otherwise would have moved. If you want to switch between non-SAVE IDR plans, so if you're in payee and you want to switch to IBR or switch to ICR, now's not the time to do that. If you're in those other plans and you're not being asked to recertify, just continue making your payments in those plans and wait till the IDR application process is open again to do that switch. Additional guidance for public service loan forgiveness borrowers. So, of course, you want to download your PSLF records and progress from both your federal student aid account, the tracker, which we're going to go over in a minute, and any notifications that you may have received from your loan servicer. So look in the loan servicer inbox. If you were on payee, IBR, or ICR, make those payments because they're going to count towards PSLF, and monitor your recertification dates and take the steps necessary if you're faced with recertification at a point where they won't process your applications or they're not pushing back your recertification dates. For those of you in the SAVE forbearance, really at this point, you're just going to have to wait for further guidance. You're, like I said, almost 100% sure you're going to have to switch plans. Income-based repayment is going to be the recommended plan because that's the one plan that's least susceptible to litigation. But if payee and ICR are available after the litigation is over and they're cheaper for you, you can enroll in those plans because they will qualify for PSLF. So unlike the IDR forgiveness, where you just can't get, you may not be able to get IDR forgiveness after 20 or 25 years in, say, the payee plan or the ICR plan, all IDR plans qualify for PSLF. That's in the statute. So payments in any of these plans are going to qualify. Submit the PSLF buyback request if you meet the requirements. No guarantee here, but again, it can't hurt to submit the request. If you're eligible, and this is probably not going to apply to a whole lot of people, but if you're eligible and if you can afford the payments, you can get credit for PSLF in the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan. And that's something that you should be able to switch into out of the save forbearance right now. So you can contact us for some guidance on this. You want to contact the servicer though and make sure that you understand what the payment is going to be in the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan. But remember, if you've got consolidation loans, the vast majority of you are not going to be eligible for this plan. If your balance is more than $7,500 and you're in a consolidation loan, the repayment periods on these standard fixed plans are set at specific time periods, like 12 or 15 or 20 or 30, depending on your loan balance. So you're generally not going to be eligible for the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan. And I know some servicers have told people, oh, just, go into the 30-year fixed repayment plan, it's going to count towards forgiveness. It doesn't. The only way you got credit for that was through the IDR account adjustment, and that was all retroactive. Going forward, that plan does not count towards PSLF. You can continue to submit your employment verification forms. So that's the PSLF certification form. This is something that's not impacted by the litigation. We've seen no indication that they're going to change this process. In fact, they just kind of newly implemented this process last July when they switched it from MOHELA over to the Department of Education. Remember, these are the forms that verify that you've met the employment requirements for the PSLF program. It has nothing to do with your income-driven repayment plans. You have to submit one form, or at least one form, for every qualifying employer that you've had since October 1st of 2007 or later if your loans were dispersed at a later date. You want to submit the forms annually or whenever you change jobs. There's no set deadline for submitting them, but there has to be one on record to cover all 120 qualifying payments in order for you to get forgiveness. So we recommend that you do this annually and or whenever you change jobs. And then I can't reiterate enough this last bullet point. We strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you use the PSLF help tool, which is something you can use from your studentaid.gov account, and request an electronic signature from your employer. That's a feature that became available, I think, sometime in 2023. And you can still generate a form through the PSLF help tool and request a manual signature, but any form that's submitted with a manual signature is going to lay in a pile for a really long period of time. If you submit using the electronic signature function, you're going to get a relatively quick processing of the forms and a relatively quick update on your PSLF qualifying payment count. So all you need to do this is you need to have the email address for the person who is going to electronically sign off on the forms. And if you have anybody in these are generally people in HR, if you have people in your HR departments that won't sign off on it electronically for any reason, contact us. We have some advocacy letters that we might be able to help you with, explaining why it's so important for them to do it this way. And then, of course, you want to monitor your progress towards public service loan forgiveness using the tracker. You won't have one of these trackers until you submit at least one employment certification form. But once you do that, you will have the tracker. You can go into great detail on this. It's going to show you loan by loan what your qualifying payment count is, how many qualifying payment counts are left, and you can also drill in on the detail, see which months are qualifying, which months are not qualifying, see which months need employment certification, and you can even look at the reasons if it's marked as ineligible. And if anybody wants a more detailed guide on how to navigate this tracker, reach out to me because I have a little guide that I can send out. Okay, and we're almost done here, but just wanted to make a quick mention about defaults. So you probably are aware of the fact that there was a program during COVID and during the Biden administration called Fresh Start that allowed borrowers to get out of default and repair their credit. That That program ended on September 30th of last year. And though it's over, there are still 2 different ways to get out of default. So remember, there is we're resurrecting the rehabilitation process, which is a process whereby you make 9 monthly payments over a 10-month period on time and in full, and that removes the loans from default. It also removes the default notation from your credit report, but remember there's also a delinquency notation, which is not going to be removed as a result of rehabilitation. This is a long process. It could be a little bit expensive because you do have to make payments. Can take up to a year to complete, but it is once again an option. And just remember, you can only successfully complete a rehabilitation 1 time per loan. The other way to get a loan out of default, of course, is consolidation, which is going to replace the old defaulted loans with new loans. There is no credit repair associated with this, and it generally it generally takes 2 to 3 months to do this, so a lot faster, a lot easier than default, and it can be done at no cost if you do it online. But at this moment, it might not be advisable to use consolidation to get out of default because once again, you can't enroll in an IDR plan. And if you use consolidation online to do it, you have to enroll in an IDR plan to get out of default. If you're in default, we advise that you just reach out and get advice before moving ahead. So just want to mention that in the last part of this deck, there's just 1 page with some relevant links that you can go through to access some of the things that we talked about, including right here, the IDR application PDF. If you need that, you won't be able to Google it and get it online, but you can get it here. So with that, I'm going to end my piece of it, and Carolina will open it up to questions.
Yes. So a lot of questions. What's your advice? Should people be renewing their PSLF right now, whether they're unsafe or not? Their employment certification, I should say. Should they be recertifying?
Yeah, I think there's no downside to updating your employment, particularly if you think you might be wanting to use the buyback. Now, if you remember, you're not going to get credit for the period that you were in the save forbearance. So if you last updated it during the save forbearance, if you update it now, you're not going to get any additional qualifying payment credit, but you will update the employment on record. But there's no downside to doing it, really.
I was also saying that if you are trying to see if you get a buyback, you should definitely update your employment record so they can have like the 120 employment record.
But you want to wait and make sure you're doing it in a month that you will reach 120 qualifying months.
Absolutely. Yeah. Someone was asking what is the best IDR plan, and I was just going into the details of like it really depends. Like your eligibility for income-driven repayment plans, it's based on when your loans were disbursed. And given the IDR challenges, we would have to have a one-on-one conversation for us to really brainstorm. In general, or advice right now has been IBR because that's in statute and may last a little bit longer. But also right at this moment, we cannot switch people or get them enrolled into an IDR if they're not enrolled. So it's a lot of the people that are in either the safe forbearance or in an income-driven repayment plan, we're just probably gonna say like stay put because we can't do anything to switch you out. And then let me see.
Can I also I'll just make one additional comment to that. So while we do, and I think I alluded to this when I was doing the presentation, while we do recommend IBR if you're eligible for it, that would be our first choice. There might be reasons why you can't get into the IBR plan, and that was the income situation that I was mentioning. But if you can't get into IBR, you may well be able to get into ICR if it is still available. And that would count towards PSLF as long as they don't eliminate the program as part of the litigation. So stay tuned.
Someone says I should be eligible for PSLF in 2025, but in October 2025, but for the safe forbearance is the only option to try buyback. And October is still a few months ago, so my advice would be keep an eye out. The moment IDR plan switches can happen, I would switch out of save into another IDR, and hopefully we'll get some guidance on that just to continue accumulating credit. But yes, I think if anything, and again, we still don't know whether people are going to be successful with buyback for the safe forbearance months. We have yet to see anyone get it. So we'll see. If you currently have saved, should you switch to payee? The thing is, you cannot switch right now. So there's no switching in IDR plans. If once the IDR plan applications reopen, at that point, we're gonna hopefully know which plans are surviving, or general advice if you're eligible, we say IBR. Payee we look into because it may be cheaper than IBR if you had older loans, if you had loans prior to 2014. So just bottom line right now, you cannot switch right now. Once it reopens, if you need a little bit more one-on-one guidance to figure out which plan is best for you, we're happy to do that. I graduated in May and applied for an IDR in December. I have been in forbearance since. Should I be switching my plan since save will likely be canceled? And nothing will happen right now, so chances are you're still going to be in forbearance. Similar advice: the moment IDR processing resumes, you want to explore what's available and then follow up on that application or follow any guidance at that point, which may include to resubmit one. And I should say one thing: if you're not getting our newsletters, and I'll put it in the chat, sign up for a newsletter because that's our best way to communicate with people. And obviously, once IDR processing resumes, we're going to be able to do that.
And actually, that's the last link on this deck here. When you get the deck, you'll be able to click the link, but put it in the chat, but it's on this deck as well.
You discussed legislation to limit eligibility for PSLF. Can you expand on this a little bit?
So the Trump administration came out with an executive order, what was it, last week, or it might even been this week, I can't remember, just very recently, saying that they're proposing, they've instructed the Department of Education to redefine what's a qualifying employer for public service loan forgiveness. And they did this, they mentioned that they don't want to offer PSLF to basically organizations that promote things like or help with illegal immigration. They talked about promoting child abuse, which that just sounds crazy to me, or who help people violate state laws. I think what they're getting at is they for anybody that might support people and organizations that protest. It was a little bit vague, number one, on how they're going to identify these organizations and whether or not they plan to just focus on non-501c3 nonprofits. So the rules for PSLF state that the employer is eligible, all 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofits are eligible. So that the 501c3 is an IRS designation indicating that you're tax-exempt. There are other not-for-profit organizations that have a different IRS designation. They may not be completely tax exempt, but they provide public services. And then they go on to list a whole bunch of public services that qualify, things like education, legal assistance, healthcare, that kind of stuff. So it's not clear whether they're going to be targeting that group of not-for-profit organizations that are not 501c3s, because as I was saying earlier, 501c3 organizations by law all qualify for PSLF. So it's very unclear right now. Nothing's changed right now as a result of this announcement. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be pushback on this if he tries to really move forward with this. So we'll have to see right now, but I wouldn't, there's nothing you can do about it at this point. And if you're with a 501c3, nothing's going to change in the near term.
Okay. So we can't change anything right now, but we should figure out what is the best option. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, and I think this person is new into the loan repayment system, a recent grad. I highly encourage you to take advantage of our one-on-one services because this is now the time. And despite not being able to enroll in an IDR right now, it's going to be helpful for you to just like understand the repayment plan options, what you may be looking at, and also just better understand PSLF and how that might look like for you. So reach out. Everyone who registers is going to get a copy of the recording and the PowerPoint presentation. But you can book your own appointment at edcapny.org. You just go to like get one-on-one and you can book a virtual session. Everyone in our staff is amazing, so you would be great with any of us. And I think that's it.
And just to reiterate, because that last question, questioner said, how will we know when it changes? Subscribe to our newsletter. Subscribe to our newsletter because when it changes, we'll put out a newsletter blast.
Yeah, and we'll include the link to the newsletter subscription in the follow-up email that you'll get.
I would also just jump in and plug for everybody to follow EDCAP on Instagram. They do really great stories and explainers, tons of information there. So just it's a great follow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other last minute questions? Or I think that we maybe actually answered everybody's questions and we've done it on time. We should get an extra gold star for that. Okay, well, once again, thank you so much for listening and thank you for all your great questions. We know and we understand that this is a very stressful and difficult situation and time, but we're there working as hard as we can to just get the best information to you as quickly as possible. And anytime you want a consultation, just reach out. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up.
Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. And I hope that this was helpful to folks.
Okay, take care, everyone.